It is now my pleasure to introduce SEC Chair Gary Gensler, the man that never sleeps and keeps many of us up at night. Chair Gensler was, I see him now on the screen. Hold on. Sorry, my remarks were up here and now they disappear with your face, Gary.
All right. I was listening to Gail and you, Yvette. That was a proper introduction. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Yvette.
So Chair Gensler was appointed to the SEC by the Senate in April 2021. While he's been at the SEC just a short while, he's had a long career in public service. He was the CFTC chair during the financial crisis and worked closely with the Obama administration on the Dodd-Frank Act and reforming the swaps market. He served as senior advisor to the Secretary of the Treasury and the Undersecretary of the Treasury for Domestic Finance, and more recently as chair of the Maryland Financial Consumer Protection Commission. As the senior advisor to Senator Paul Sarbanes, he helped write the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. In addition to his government service, Chair Gensler was a professor at MIT's Sloan School of Management, a co-director of MIT's FinTech, and a senior advisor to the MIT Media Lab Digital Currency Initiative. Earlier in his career, Chair Gensler was a partner at Goldman Sachs. He is a native of Baltimore, where he raised 3 daughters. You won't be surprised to learn that he runs marathons and enjoys mountain climbing. Those hobbies are good skills for the challenges that he's taken on at the SEC, but he also has that sprinter talent of being quick off the starting block. And we'll be talking about this regulatory race in just a minute. Please join me in welcoming Chair Gary Gensler.
And you left out, I think I've worked with your brother in 3 administrations.
Exactly. Well, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. Why don't we start with the big picture? And you may have heard Gail talk about the cumulative impact of regulation. The IAA has recommended over the years that the SEC look at the cumulative impact of all of its regulations on registrants. While the SEC does a cost-benefit analysis of each regulation individually, regulation does not exist in a vacuum, and the proposed regulations are both interconnected and have broad implications. And the implementation is cumulative. The same people within our member firms, operations, compliance, business lines, have to execute well on a host of new regulations coming down at the same time. There are also a limited number of outsourced vendors who can help them, and they're all doing it at one moment here. What is your approach to looking holistically at regulatory requirements and the feasibility of firms operationalizing all of these major rules at once?
So if I might, Karen, just start, because I did get a chance to listen to Yvette and Gail and your back and forth. We're motivated by our 3-part mission: investors on the one side, protecting them, capital formation on the other, and then that which is in the middle, efficient, fair, and orderly markets. And a lot of your members are, of course, helping in the middle. It's managing other people's money, the investors, facilitating that capital formation, but that which is in the middle. To your question, we are, in every one of our roles, we follow the law, we put it out to public comment, we benefit from your comments, and even something like this we'll put in the public files. I don't know if you're going to send us a transcript, it's a public meeting, but I was listening. We benefit from that give and take and those public comments back. What we do, as you accurately said, we do an economic analysis on each of these, and there's a baseline, and the baseline is, you say cumulative, there's a lot of regulations that are on the books, whether they're recently adopted in the last 2 to 5 years or long ago adopted. That's part of the baseline. But I encourage your members to write in on comments if they see some, cross-pollination. We usually group some of the rules together. So like, I know that you were talking about what was called ESG, environmental, social, and governance role. we proposed that at the same time of an update of a 20-year-old rule, the names rule, because we thought those have a lot of interlinkages. We've also reopened some of our proposals on, for instance, stock lending and short selling, because there was, sort of a more direct interlinking in that regard. But I would also encourage your members to write in even now, if it's even past a comment period. We have a long tradition at the SEC that if comments come post the comment period, if you see something, the staff considers it. The members like myself of the 5-member commission consider what we can along the way.
Well, we appreciate that, and people are taking notes. I think they are going to actually be writing into you. And in fact, we look forward to following up with you on a lot of issues. One of the things in terms of the interconnectedness, and we will follow up because there are a lot of interconnected pieces, but our members, as you know, are mostly small businesses, and our industry is mostly small business. And I know you've mentioned in our meetings that you come from a family that ran a small business, so you get it. They're trying to implement all of these at the same time. Are you all giving any thought to staggering compliance periods or having different kinds of compliance periods for different kinds of rule implementation in firms?
So again, we'll benefit from public comment, but though we've adopted some of the rules that we've proposed today, we still have some projects on the horizon. Equity market structure is something that has gotten a lot of public attention, but we've not yet proposed those. We have some other issues in our corporate finance and in our trading and markets, but you mentioned in the investment management space, the custody, that we're taking up some ideas on custody and on third-party service providers are 2 areas. And you rightly mentioned digital engagement practices, or what I might call the use of the algorithms and predictive data analytics and machine learning in robo-advising. So that would be something that would touch your members. But we're going to try to get through those remaining proposals. There are some adoptions that we've done to date, but then turn throughout the period to looking at adoption. And as you rightly said, then there's the implementation dates to consider.
Right, and that's going to be a heavy lift for our members in all of these areas, and even rules that aren't directly under the Advisors Act or directly affect our members. For example, T+1, our members are going to have to execute on all of these, right, at the same time. So you will be hearing from us about the compliance dates.
That is one that when we proposed shortening the settlement cycle is what I call a resiliency project. And we have close to a dozen of these. I think it's part of our job to make sure that the markets are more resilient look, we're living through uncertain times right now. We've seen this in the last few days in the international bond markets for sure, and the currency markets, but to build greater resiliency into the system. So shortening those settlement cycles from 2 days to 1 day. In that proposal, we actually put in, I want to get my years right, a March of 24 implementation date. So in the proposal, which was 10 months ago at least, we sort of said, all right, think through, put everybody on notice. And now I can't prejudge when we'll adopt and how we'll adopt, but we tried to put that out there. We also, of course, have other resiliency projects in the treasury market and money market funds that we've proposed.
Well, and you've been talking about a lot of different proposals, right? And I think there are 50-something on the Reg Flex agenda.
And I note, just to your audience, Jay Clayton, we went back, I asked somebody to add up, did 64 final rules. So Mary Shapiro did a similar number, Mary Jo White, maybe a little less. So we're right in the zone, Karen. You're
just off the starting block faster, right?
All right. So You know, it's like these are important subjects. These are important subjects to build greater competition and efficiency in our markets, whether that's in our treasury markets, whether it's in our equity markets, and yes, whether it's in our private funds market that has $21 trillion of assets under management and is growing very significantly. And I would note just for a moment, $21 trillion in the private fund space is nearly as big as our entire commercial banking sector. Our entire commercial banking sector in the U.S. about 24 trillion. Private funds probably are on the path to, surpass the total commercial banking sector. And so I think it is relevant and important for us to do this, but it's not what I think, it's what Congress thinks. Congress embedded in our laws, both in the 1970s and the 1990s, and two big reforms of the securities laws that we look at efficiency and competition and try to use the tools to, of course, lower the cost of capital for those raising money and enhance returns on the other. But yes, that is something about those in the middle, which are a lot of your members. So I can understand the give and take as we do what Congress mandated in the 70s and 90s to think about efficiency and competition.
Right, and just on that point, I would note, a lot of people talk about investment advisors as intermediaries, there's issuers, there are investors, but from our point of view, investment advisors are providing a very valuable and separate service to their members. They're helping their members save for retirement, for education, for their kids', weddings and special events, and all of those important life. They're helping their clients through divorces and deaths of loved ones and life events. And so they're not just some middle person. They are providing a very important service to their members, and it's valuable, and it should be valued in its own right, and not just as a connector between these two points, as you will, on the.
It's a very valuable thing. I mean, I spent 18 years in investment banking, and I was on the advisory side primarily. So the value of advice is a very important feature of our capital markets, no doubt. But I'm saying Congress gave us a remit and mandate to try to use transparency and competition to promote greater efficiency in the markets.
To that end, and you're speaking about a lot of different issues, and in your testimony a couple weeks ago, you talked about, the sequencing, they come out when they come out. But are there any of these initiatives that are most near and dear to your heart that you just want to see get done and make sure to complete the pass on?
Well, Karen, I have 3 daughters. Would you want me to pick amongst them? No. I love them all the same. Next question.
Well, let's talk about another issue that's very important to all of us, and that's cybersecurity. You heard us talk a little bit about it up here. We all have the same goal with cybersecurity. We don't want cyber attacks, and when cyber attacks happen, we want to make sure that nobody gets harmed, and deal with it as quickly as possible. We appreciate in the meetings that we've had with you and your staff and the SEC staff, your willingness to listen and hear all the different implications for all of our different kinds of members. We're looking at the reporting periods. We're supportive of having policies and procedures. Our members already do, and they're required to have them under the compliance program rule. We're looking at the reporting requirements to the SEC, and we have some concerns, as you know, as we've discussed, about the 48-hour turnaround and the need ongoing need to update the SEC as advisors work through these cyber attacks. We feel that the window is too short, and the ongoing reporting might detract from the response to what's happening on the ground. In terms of all the feedback you're hearing, what are your views on that, and where can we go from here? And what is the commission going to do with the information it gets, I guess, is another.
So let me see if I can answer that and give you a broader answer to the earlier question as well, to help your members know a little bit about this guy that's, Zooming or WebExing into you. I would say that in terms of cybersecurity, what we found is this is a growing risk in our economy. And everybody knows it. I mean, the internet age came along. I mean, the first cyber hack was in the 1830s, by the way. It was a very early days of telegraph, and it happened in Paris. And it's a wonderful story. The Blanc brothers stole some information from the telegraph operators. 200 years later, though, it's a much more challenging situation. And 200 years later, from the Blanc brothers, cybersecurity risks are what so many firms focus on. So we thought we'd take this up. We did our first cyber rule about 8 years ago about the largest entities called Systems Compliance and Integrity, SCI. We're going to update that. That doesn't really touch your members. But we thought that it was important to look at what I've colloquially call cyber hygiene and cyber incident reporting. We worked a lot and collaborated. We talked a lot to a group over at Department of Homeland Security's cybersecurity. It's called CISA. I won't get all the letters right. Run by Jen Easterly, and got a lot of input and everything. And we put that proposal out that you talked about cyber hygiene and incident reporting. I can't prejudge where we're going to end up. We're still sorting through those comments. We benefit from those comments, as you said, about, is 48 hours the right number? Is another number correct? I would say that the other thing that we're looking at is the investor themselves. We have a rule that's on the books. It's about 20 plus years old, called Rule SP. And Rule SP, which was a rule that you might have seen an enforcement action a couple weeks ago around a financial firm called Morgan Stanley that had basically 15 million customers' information were on these equipment, the hardware that they thought was being properly handled, but wasn't in individuals' information, PII, ended up out there. So we've had that Rule SP, for 20 years. We're also looking to update that. Basically, if an individual's information is compromised and the like. But again, we're going to take the comments to heart and sort of look and see. But I think cybersecurity is a key risk, and it's one of the risks that I'm really proud that we're updating. Look, to your question, if you were trying to understand this guy, I'm basically a markets guy, and I think the technology is rapidly changing. I guess I ended up at MIT for a reason somehow, and the faculty studying the intersection of finance and technology. And it wasn't just crypto, it was a lot about artificial intelligence as well. But I think it's rapidly changing, and we have to stay abreast of that. And we can't take our capital markets for granted. We're about 40% of the world's capital markets, 23% of the world's economy, and only 3 or 4% of the world's population. And so I just feel like we should do everything we can in the privilege of service, whatever, 5, 6 years I get, and others, the privilege, this is a team effort, of making sure our capital markets are updated for the technologies we have and the realities of that time that we live in the 2020s. So that's kind of my core. Making markets more efficient and competitive is part of that, but it's also updating it for the technologies around cybersecurity or in the disclosure space, that investors truly do make decisions today based on climate risk, and they didn't 30 and 40 years ago. And so what information did in that conversation, or addressing possibly the predictive data analytics and robo-advising space.
So you're intending to update Reg SP, the protection of customer data for investment advisors as well as brokers? Yes, it's on our unified agenda. Excellent. It wasn't clear from the unified agenda whether it was for both, so I appreciate that. We do feel that the cyber rule should be calibrated for small businesses. We are totally aligned in making sure that we have our policies and procedures and data and breach notification of affected clients and all of that. But there are some parts of the cybersecurity proposal that are not calibrated for small businesses, and we hope to continue to work with you to exclude small businesses from some of those prescriptive requirements where they don't make sense or not possible. For example, where smaller businesses don't have the leverage to get certain contractual provisions from their vendors. Turning to another rule that you just touched on, and that is ESG, or climate risk. We're pleased that the SEC is focusing on it. We, as the buy side, want comparable and consistent data that we can use in making investment decisions for our clients. And we also strongly support the concept of transparency and clearly stating what our investment strategies are. And we already do, actually. We're already required to state key and material information about our investment strategies in our Form ADV and in PPMs and the like. We're looking at the climate risk proposal. We largely support it. Some of the concerns we have that we would like to see changes on are, I think, as you maybe heard Gail mention, sort of getting that balance right in terms of the materiality of information that's required to be disclosed. We don't want to see the climate risk factors overemphasized to the detriment of other factors that might be equally important. And so we don't want to end up sort of with, you're trying to get at greenwashing, but we don't want to have greenwashing as a result of the rule. In other words, making the disclosures in that area so much larger, more detailed than the disclosures in other areas that it looks like you're doing more than you actually are. So how are you, you're getting feedback on that. How are you thinking about that?
Can I get feedback right now, live feedback? So that's all right. So on the issuer side, you say you're largely supportive. That's the 8,000 public issuers in the U.S.
And we're largely supportive on the investment advisor side too for the disclosure proposal.
But what I was trying to learn from you is on the issuer side, and then we'll get to the investment advisor side. On the issuer side, are you saying that you think that some of the things, the balance there, maybe the materiality or the balance there we didn't get right? Again, we have 14 or 15,000 comment letters. So
right. No, I should have made that.
Gotten to your letter.
No, I can't believe you didn't memorize my letter. That comment was on the investment advisor side. Okay. On the material, on the standard of disclosure in Form ADV to clients on the advisor side. One of the things about stepping back and looking holistically, looking at all of the disclosures that clients get on all of these issues, we're trying to look holistically at that, and we're concerned that the disclosure form that goes to investors is going to overemphasize the climate factors.
And that's, I apologize to interrupt, but that's from the asset manager, investment advisor, to its clients. Correct. As opposed to the issuer to you. On the issuer to you part, I'll go back and read your letter, but is there anything you wanted to flag there?
On that one, it's more about sequencing with making sure that that's done and we get the information before we're making disclosures to our own clients about the information so that the consistency and comparability flows down from the issuers to us, from us to our clients.
Look, I think the challenge for us as an agency, we're a disclosure agency, and I say this often, but I'll say it again here for anyone listening, the press, otherwise. We're not a merit-based regulator. This was a debate in the 1930s. It's been redebated over the decades. I think I agree with what Congress did over the decades, that it's about full, fair, and truthful disclosure from the issuer, these 7,000 or 8,000 issuers, that you as an investors or investment advisors then benefit from that and have some consistency and comparability And as you say, it's in this framework of materiality. It's in a framework that the Supreme Court and other courts have laid out on materiality, but it's a conversation that's already happening. And we need to sort through these 14 or 15,000 comments and sort through and really, make adjustments where appropriate in terms of the costs and what we heard from the investor side and what we heard from the issuer side, and also within the laws, because the courts matter, and we've even had movement, all the way up to the Supreme Court recently in broadly speaking in the administrative state. In terms of the fund side, on the fund side, I've frankly sort of approached it, me as one commissioner, is think of it as truth in marketing. And Congress embedded in the Investment Company Act, I think, if I recall it accurately, but it might have been in the Investor Advisors Act, this concept of a name in 1940, what stands behind a name. And then they modified it in 1996 and gave us new authorities, and we wrote a rule about 20 years ago on names. After 22 years, we all kind of felt, the staff and those of us on the commission who voted for it felt it was time to update that names rule. I think of it as almost like a truth in advertising, a truth in marketing. And there are some funds out there that are saying one thing but doing another, and aligning that which they say with that which they do. But again, we're merit neutral. And that's because Congress told us to be, and I think that's the right balance. Investors get to decide what risks they want to take.
Absolutely, and we agree with that. I mean, our top line principle on this is policy should facilitate sustainable investing, but not mandate particular factors. So,
actually, I'll go further. Policy should also facilitate if somebody wants to go short that strategy as well. It's neutral. It's whether you go long a strategy or short a strategy.
I could not agree more. Strategy neutral is what is actually our top line theme there as well. So we would like to see the materiality concept that you just discussed flow through into the advisor and fund disclosure piece as well. But turning to another topic that's near and dear to our members' hearts, that's fiduciary duty and Reg BI. The fiduciary duty interpretation affirmed investment advisors' duties that have existed for more than 80 years and that our members have always been subject to. And Reg BI for brokers is obviously new. We appreciate that the SEC staff is interpreting Reg BI and fiduciary duty in a meaningful way through several sets of guidance with more to come. What is your perspective on how that is going, and what additional guidance needs to be issued? What do you see coming up down the road with that?
We're going through each of the pieces of it, and I encourage your members to connect with Barb Roper, who's in my front office and is a senior advisor to me, and is just terrific on these issues. And it's really just questions that have come up about conflicts and the giving of advice, or in the brokerage side, best interest, as you rightly pointed out. That which was finalized by my predecessors now is it I'm losing track, 3 or 4 years ago.
2019, right.
2019, so thank you, 3 years ago. And so it's trying to give, going through it, and the staff is trying to answer questions that have come up through that staff guidance. And there has been, if I say, the American public doesn't make as much of a distinction as we do in our laws. The 40 Act and the 34 Act are different. They're different legal regimes for investment advisors and broker-dealers. But the investing public, they swipe left, they swipe right. There's investment advisors. They might be your members with millions of customers now. The number of separately managed accounts in the U.S. have grown in the last 5 years from like 32-ish million to like 55-ish million. I'm sorry if I don't have the exact figure.
64 million clients. 64 million clients.
There you go. There you go. And so those separately managed accounts, why is it growing so rapidly? A lot of it is also in the robo-advising space. But somebody goes on those apps, and I won't name each one of them, but you know that some of the names, and they literally have 1 million, 3 million, 6 million customers, and they go to one screen and they're getting something that looks a lot and feels a lot like investment advice, and they switch screens, and they can buy and sell a security, or they can buy and sell a crypto security token. And they better be compliant with the law, by the way. And so
I knew you were going to get that in somewhere.
yeah, there you go, Karen. But so there's a to the American public kind of a blurring, even though we do have these two laws, and they're important distinctions.
And that's actually one of our concerns as well. We would like to see the commission make sure that there's clarity around the differences between investment advisors and broker-dealers. Obviously, what you're trying to do is make sure that everybody gets advice that is in their best interest, and we agree with that. But there are some important distinctions between investment advisors and broker-dealers, and we're concerned that unintended consequence, some of the rulemakings have muddied the water. So we'd like to work with you to make sure that the investors understand that investment advisors are fiduciaries with respect to the entire relationship on an ongoing basis, and not on a transaction by transaction basis, which we think is a very important distinction that consumers need to know.
No, but you want to put, I would just say, you want to put your client's interest ahead of your own. I mean, that's what duty of loyalty talks about. It's loyalty to that customer and duty of care. So I understand what you're saying, but when somebody, a transaction only occasionally, each transaction matters a lot.
Absolutely. We definitely agree on that point. I want to give you the final word here. We're running out of time. What do you see as the top challenges for the SEC and investors that you would like to leave with this audience of investment advisors here?
Oh, I just want to thank you all. I mean, I listened enough to Gail and Yvette, and I can tell from your comments that you've got input, constructive input. Some of it maybe will differ on, but to continue to give us the benefit of that input and the lively back and forth in the dialogue. We benefit from that. At the core, we're trying to, achieve and enhance the experience for investors, for people raising money, and making our markets fair, orderly, and efficient, as we say. I think that we are in uncertain times. The geopolitical side of this, the world has challenges, and market events just remind us of that. But I don't need to remind you all. And we live in a world with rapidly changing technology. So you'll keep hearing at least this guy talking about how do we enhance our markets that, as the old saying goes, that same activities get the same regulation. And it doesn't matter how you sort of cleverly put it in a different legal box, or you try to, think of, well, how do I do it, this new technology? And that's why we're taking up some of these issues around conflicts of interest in the predictive data analytics, algorithmic advisory shops that you'll see that we'll sort of take a look at. But no, my only thought is keep engaging with the SEC.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. And we appreciate your being open to our comments, and your staff is terrific, and the entire SEC staff does engage with us.
They
and we
are
appreciate
good, aren't
that.
they?
They really are.
are. So.
Well, thank you. And please join me in thanking SEC Chair Gary Gensler.
And thank Karen.